Well, I bet you all thought this day would never come, huh? It's been a couple days since my last Wheel of Time review, which, of course, I somehow managed to never record and officially review A Memory of Light or The Wheel of Time as a whole. That's what I'm doing now. So let's talk about A Memory of Light, book 14, and the epic conclusion to Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. Let's talk about it. So please bear with me for a moment as I recall some of what happened in this book. I do have a lot of notes written on my phone from when I read it and recently just kind of refreshing my memory on certain plot points that happened. So I'm going to hit on some of those as well as review the series as a whole because I just kind of want to talk about my experience through the Wheel of Time. And I'm actually going to get some of that out of the way first. I think this series, when it comes to epic fantasy, absolutely deserves a ton of praise for what it's accomplished, for being able to really create a compelling narrative and world and magic system and a ton of interesting fantasy characters. Some of the plot is fantastic. Some of the situations that these characters are in is some of the best in fantasy, but that doesn't come without issues where, for me at least personally, a lot of this series falters for the same reasons that it excels. That being, Robert Jordan really wanted to create a living, breathing world and have so much information provided to the reader, so many characters known and named, so many locations really fleshed out. And while that's admirable, and I can see why so many people absolutely adore that for the series and why they do annual rereads, because there's so much you're never going to pick up on even one, two, or three full reads through the series. For me, I feel like it detracted a lot from the overall narrative, and there were entire books almost, yes, the slog, where I felt like so much of the content could have been cut out and my experience would have been better, and the series just would have flowed better. You wouldn't have had this meandering, basically three full books where not much happens in the plot to move it forward, and while you're focusing on other things and some of the pacing just slows down, narrative slows down. For me, I just felt like that could have been better, I guess, streamlined or cut down into honestly a single book with how little like big events happen, and then roll straight into the post slog books. I obviously the slog exists because mostly of the initial publication of the books, where it were so many years between publications, and then you get a book that doesn't really move the plot forward very much. Like, that inherently creates a slog. Luckily for me, all the books have been out for a while. I didn't have to wait, years on end for the next one to arrive. But yeah, for me, Path of Daggers, Winter's Heart, and Crossroads of Twilight, damn, if I wasn't already invested in the series and, trying to get to the good books after the slog, I would have given up. Especially if this was on release, I would have just been like, what is he doing anymore with the series? This is terrible. I hate it. And that's what one of the biggest up and downs in the series for me, just in general. It started off incredibly strong. Books 1 through 6, except for some of Fires I have in book 5, I absolutely adored. I thought they were fantastic. I was fully invested in damn near every aspect of it. And then when the slog hits, I guess I should include book 7 because I actually really liked Crown of Swords. But when it starts with Path of Daggers, I was so bored through most of it. And the series is so up and down for me. It's like a roller coaster of incredibly high highs and incredibly low lows, where some of the peak, the best fantasy scenes I've ever read are in these books. I mean, the ending of Lord of Chaos, fantastic. So much of what happens in The Shadow Rising, so much of what happens in, Towers of Midnight and The Gathering Storm and A Memory of Light. There's so many fantastic epic fantasy moments and moments that make you cheer, moments that make you cry. And then there's also moments that make you cry because the book is so boring that you can't stand it. And that really bugged me, where I would go hundreds of pages at a time and just really dislike what I was reading and want to get back to the main story. That's not going to be everyone's experience. I know there's plenty of people that don't believe that whatsoever. More power to you. But that is my viewpoint on the series. I think it's absolutely worth reading. I'm happy that I did read it. And I think Brandon Sanderson did a phenomenal job of bringing it to its conclusion. And obviously some of the later books because he had so much to work with, and I think he's just very, very good at pacing a narrative, that really helped move those final books along. But overall, the Wheel of Time in general, I think I liked it a lot. I didn't love it. I certainly hated some of it. I certainly loved some of it. It's not something that I think I would be itching to go back through again, just because they're so long and there's so much stuff that I feel like I could almost skip, that it's not going to be that serious for me. But happy to have read it, and let's talk about the finale to this epic series. So looking back at Towers of Midnight before this book kicks off, in the epilogue, you are left with a couple of things where Perrin is basically able to control himself and his wolf powers. He realizes that he wasn't lost in the wolf dream. Kudos to Perrin. Olver and Telmanis open the letter, they're reading it, they look up, they see that Camelin is on fire. Oh, sound the alarm, shit, we're under attack. Shadow Spawn coming through the Waygate. Like, this is not good. You have Rand interacting with Sindane, aka Lanfear, and just seeing the horrible state that she's in the dream world, and she's just a mess and being tortured, and it makes you feel bad for her, as crazy as she is. And then, of course, you do have Lan and his somewhat small army of about 12,000 people charging headlong into a group of Shadow Spawn, very, very outnumbered. I mean, it's the numbers very much do not favor them. Of course, this harkens back to something like, the Battle of Pelennor Fields, where you have Rohan charging into this insurmountable odds of an orc army. So, needless to say, Lan and his crew are not in the best of shape when they're charging into this seemingly unbeatable army. So what this book does incredibly well for the majority of the book is, before you get to the last battle, you have a lot of other battles that are going on that are basically like a prelude to the finale battle, where you have Camelin sort of front and center being attacked, Elaine leading, a bunch of armies against the Shadow Spawn, working on closing the Waygate that is just pouring, these Shadow Spawn through. You have tons and tons of Trollocs, which we're missing for several books. They're here now. One of the biggest jokes kind of going around the first few books is whenever there's like a lull, hey, look, Shadow Spawn, Trollocs appear. Trollocs are here in force in this book, and they're not going anywhere. So lots and lots of killing to be had. Obviously, Rand is working on breaking the seals. That's still his plan. His plan all along, has been to break the seals of the Dark One's prison, let him out into the world so that they can defeat him and reseal him properly, since the seals were weakened. Because, as we learn later on in the book, you can't just outright kill him. We'll get to that later. But he is kind of going back and forth with everybody, Egwene, Nynaeve, Moraine, everybody else, all the other Aes Sedai, Aviendha, really discussing why he has to do this, why he believes this is correct, and it's the only way to truly defeat him. There's a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion, a lot of sort of fighting about whether or not that's accurate and should happen. But ultimately, they do decide that that's what's going to happen, and Rand is going to go to Shayol Ghul to finally battle, the Dark One and finish this once and for all. We, of course, cut back to Lan and his army trying their damn best to defeat this vast army and show of strength from the Trollocs. They are losing until, of course, I believe like a gate opens and more cavalry comes to sort of save the day. So nice little cavalry charge. I'm always a sucker for that, where an army comes at the last second, or the last hour before your heroes are going to fall in battle, and they sort of turn the tide of that part of the war. So yay, Lan is not dead. That's always good. We, of course, have Elaine confirming to Rand that she is, in fact, pregnant with his child. Go, Rand, in your weird love square that you have, sir. You have Egwene marrying the simp Gawain. Gawain. I never cared about this relationship. That's one of the other things that I don't think the series does well, is love and relationships. I don't care about them and the relationship, but obviously it does set up a very emotional moment later and pay off there, so I can't hate on it too much, but as just like a love story, it's not quite there. We do get a lot of cool things, though, like the use of the dragons in these fights, where Elaine and Perrin sort of formulate a plan to lure a bunch of Trollocs in, and they just blow a bunch of them up with the dragons, just really getting all the use they can out of those weapons in this fight to just explode hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of Trollocs at a time, and still being overrun. I mean, there's a crazy amount of Trollocs in this fight, crazy amount of Dark Spawn. Just the numbers are definitely in the Dark One's favor. at least for a while. You have Matt sneaking into Ebadar, where he learns that assassins are coming for Tuon, which I'd be fine with. Tuon sucks. Have I mentioned the bad relationships in this series? Tuon and Matt is super weird and creepy. Matt's love interests and relationships in these books are there's something. Egwene finally gets a super badass moment, whereas, okay, so you know in the show, brief spoiler, oops, if you've seen the Wheel of Time show where they do the whole dumb thing of like the Trolloc army is coming through after they sacrifice their whole army, and then Egwene and Nynaeve and all them link up and they're just like, bah, and just like rain lightning down and kill an entire army. Egwene basically does that herself. Egwene just like Dark Phoenix modes everybody and just slaughters tens of thousands of Trollocs because she's like SSJ 5, just gravity bomb on this army, murders a ton of them. Just total badass moment for her. And I was just like, yeah, Elaine? No, Egwene, you dumbass. And of course we get to see Loyal and the Ogier singing their war chants and fighting, these big beastly MFers. They're super cool. I love Loyal. He's my boy. And seeing him in combat is sad, but also incredible. Of course, intermixed between all the battles, we have all these discussions of what's going to happen post-battle, you know, if they all survive, how borders are going to be established, peace treaties, Matt and Tuon discussing with Rand what the Shan-Chan are going to be, you know, ownership over and responsible for, talking about how they can't have, you know, slaves anymore, all this back and forth about boundaries and making sure that they're all kind of teaming with each other to conquer the Dark One, but then kind of set some boundaries, okay? We got to have rules in this place. We can't just let everybody run wild and collar people and all that shit that the Shan-Chan like to do, okay? Tuon, you crazy person. We, of course, have another gate open up and a bunch of bad guys come through and just start murdering a bunch of Aes Sedai and a lot of the good forces, so they kind of have to fall back and reformulate their plan and their strategy. We find out more about a bunch of dark friends throughout this fight, where, you know, Brynn kind of intentionally loses a high ground strategic point of Egwene's army, and they realize, oh shit, he's, you know, under the influence, not of drugs and alcohol, but of the Dark One. And several other commanders around the battle seemingly are being sort of controlled. So as we see these, you know, commanders being sort of taken under control of the Dark One, Matt kind of grabs the army and says, look, I'm in charge here. Y'all listen to me. These commanders are a little bit preoccupied in the brain area. Look, they're under compulsion, okay? It's not their fault, but you can't have them running around leading the army when they're clearly working for the other team. It's just not right. Elaine and her forces, as I said, because there's a bunch of battles going on, they basically win the fight up north, and then they get completely surrounded when, Logain and his boys show up and just like lava, just obliterate entire armies with lava, and it's awesome because Logain is the man. Meanwhile, of course, through all of this, you have Perrin chasing Slayer in and out of the Wolf Dream, trying to chase him down. So you have him kind of on his pursuit. A much better cat and mouse game and chase scene than Perrin chasing Fail for 4.5 goddamn books. This one I much more enjoyed. So even though to this point I've been talking a lot about battles, we haven't actually gotten to the quote-unquote last battle, which now we have arrived to, which goes on for 100+ pages. It's insane. This battle does really live up to the hype of what everyone told me. It is exhausting because of how much combat is involved, how many factions and different people are at play here, having to bounce between focusing on Rand to Egwene to Matt to Perrin to everybody's involved in this, and it's wonderful. It's awesome. It's one of the, I think, better written sort of massive epic battle scenes that I've ever read. This entire book really focuses on the buildup and then just straight up avalanche of combat that happens, and I'm here for all of it. Matt, of course, being his super smart, brainy guy when it comes to military strategies, is basically playing 4D chess with everybody and sending out fake orders while he has a real plan behind the scenes because he can't trust any of the officers because they're all like under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And he kind of maneuvers around them to make sure that the actual battle plan is not found out and given to the dark forces, because then obviously they would lose the battle. And it's also at this point in the book where I don't remember exactly where I was, maybe halfway through the book, 3/4 of the way through. I was starting to think, are we going to start losing some people that we've known through this entire series? Because up to this point, there haven't been a ton of losses. And sure enough, yes, Sanche herself meets her demise in this book. I believe she was the first one that we lose. I apologize if I missed somebody. We'll get to a few more, but Swan does fall in combat. And that was, of course, the first hit of, like, it was sad, but for me, I was still waiting for one of the main 4 to 5 has to go down, right? Because I thought we lost Moraine back in Fires of Heaven. We didn't. I didn't believe y'all when you told me that she was coming back a few books ago. She did. So I was really waiting for that hammer to hit of, like, Elaine or Egwene or Matt or somebody. Swan was a big loss, but not quite there yet. Of course, the simp himself, Gawain, does get mortally wounded, and again, because I already don't care about him and his relationship with Egwene, and I don't know, I was just like, oh no. Anyway, he is dying, so Egwene, naturally, because of the warder bond, is fighting toward him, and he does finally succumb to his wounds, which drives her kind of insane, and she just starts just murdering left and right, center, behind her, everywhere, just bodies hitting the floor everywhere, because Egwene is just a monster. Of course, at this point, we have a nice, because we're kind of splicing in all these different things happening. So you've got Perrin chasing Slayer in and out of the Wolf Dream. You've got the main battle going on. You've got Rand battling the Dark One for essentially, like, potential futures, and sort of having, like, this mind battle of showing, what could happen post combat, depending on who wins, who loses, who falls, who lives, what the outcome could look like. And they basically reach this point where Rand kind of understands that the Dark One is almost a necessary being. Otherwise, like, the world wouldn't function the way it should, which is why they have to seal him away and not completely delete him from the world, because that would cause chaos. We do start to see some more losses, though. Brigida does fall in this fight. Elaine is captured. Things are really starting to look kind of grim at this point. Egwene, of course, in her final moments, and this one did get me. I've already mentioned 2 other times that she has just been a total badass in this fight. Egwene actually counters Balefire targeted at her with the Flame of Tarvalon, completely counters it, obliterates a whole host of Sharan Channelers and Trollocs, and it's at this point that she basically just, like, supernovas and just, like, takes out countless people and herself in the process. And this is the moment when I was just like, damn, like, we actually just lost Egwene, and that really sucks. That's sad. Shit, I'm even a little bit emotional talking about it now, and I read this like a year ago. Egwene was a tough one. Losing Egwene kind of hit me for a moment, and I was just sitting there like, that one's tough. That one stings a little bit. Of course, this is the moment in the battle, right, where everything is looking terrible. Egwene's gone, Brigida's gone, Gawain's gone, Swan is gone. Matt and Perrin are kind of flailing a little bit in their combat. Lan is fighting his damnedest, but kind of losing, and Rand's sort of losing it too. Like, all of his friends are dying around him. They're losing the battle. The tides are turning against them. Shit does not look good. We get an awesome callback moment to, I want to say it was the Great Hunt, or was it the end of book 1? I think it was in the Great Hunt. Lan, of course, fighting with Demandred, sheaths the sword to take that victory home in that combat, which I believe was a callback to the Great Hunt. If it's Eye of the World, I'm sorry. But I know it was one of those, because Lan taught that to Rand, and it was just a super cool, just bringing that full circle back to this, finale of a battle, to have that happen again and save Lan's life. That was a great moment. It is kind of at this point now in the battle, when all hope sort of seems lost, that things start to turn a bit in the other direction. Ulver does blow the Horn of Valyr, which of course brings back Hawkwing and Brigida and all of those soldiers to help turn the tide of the battle. The wolves join the battle as well. So you start to have all these different, good factions joining the fight officially and sort of stemming the tide a little bit here. And this is when you start to get a little bit of hope of, oh, okay, we can actually win this again. You, of course, have people I haven't even mentioned, like Tom and Tam are involved in this heavily as well. Damn near the entire Randland. I don't know. Does it have a real name? Everybody's in this fight. Like, everybody who's anybody is part of this fight. It's wild just how many people, like how large scale this thing is. It's wild. But yeah, everybody's involved. Tom kills Cad Swain, or no, kills a dark friend disguised as Cad Swain. Tam is leading all the archers and, Two Rivers folk and some of the military. So they're all just trying to get through this freaking battle, man. Finally have Perrin ending Slayer once and for all. And our good little buddy Padden Fane is just skulking around the battlefield, killing basically anything that walks within a couple inches of him, because he's a crazy person, as he's trying to get to and murder Rand once and for all. This little, he's like a cockroach. He's just still alive and kicking and murdering. He's a little bastard. Matt, of course, continuing to climb the ranks of becoming my favorite character of the series. He kind of already was at this point. Gets to kill Padden Fane with his own dagger, which is just... Nynaeve and Moiraine, of course, who I've barely even mentioned, have been involved in this as well. They, of course, join with Rand to hold Moradin, get the seals in place. Rand accesses the true power, uses both Sidar and Sidene to reform the seals and hopefully lock the Dark One away forever this time. Perrin, of course, finds Sindain and invites her neck to no longer be a functioning part of her body. Finally, at the, damn near end of this exhausting period of a battle, Rand is dying. Rand is basically mortally wounded. He is not long for this earth. Randland. Perrin is literally exhausted and needs a nap. Like, he just needs to go lay down somewhere. Tuon's pregnant. Yay, Tuon. Egwene's dead. Matt's chilling. But obviously we get to the point where Rand is finally, reaching that point of he's going to be on the way out. And I kind of always thought that he was going to finally die at the end of this. I didn't see a way out for him. And Nynaeve does eventually pronounce him dead. And of course, this leads into what is the, ending of this book, where they have, a funeral procession for him. Everybody's kind of there mourning him, mourning the loss of what happened, but also, glimmer of hope, because the Dark One is sealed once again. You can kind of start to heal, but you are going to have to deal with, this tremendous loss of Rand and Egwene and everybody else that fell, on the journey here and in this final battle. Of course, though, you do have Min, Elaine, and Avienda, little schemers, talking about how they needed to convince everyone that Rand was officially dead, even though they basically got his his mind into another body. Of course, that body is Moradin, who they all sort of held and, while they sealed the Dark One away. So Rand wakes up in Moradin's body. That's a little weird, but Rand is not technically dead. Haha. And then, of course, we do draw this to a conclusion where Rand kind of looks upon them as they're having their funeral procession. I believe there's a scene, I'd have to reread the very end of the book, where Rand's kind of looking down and like Avienda, Min, and Elaine kind of see him and they know that he's going to like go away for a while, but hopefully they can reunite later at some point. And then Randarin is sort of walking away and he can't feel the power at all. So it's like, oh, so he's officially free of the power. He can no longer access it. But then he pictures a pipe being lit, and it is. Dun, dun, dun. So I finally reached the conclusion of this series, and I had some burning questions because I was still confused. And I understand that it's one of those things where you're not going to get an answer to everything, right? No conclusion to a series is ever going to tell you everything that happens when it ends. This is actually what I like, though, about something like Divinity Original Sin 2. I'll just use that as my reference. When you beat that game, your choices that you made throughout the game give you kind of a rolling credits, and they tell you what happened post-game ending. What like major implications on the world happened, what each character went on to do. Some of them are left up to interpretation or for the reader, in this case, to decide for themselves. But for the most part, it puts a nice little bow on it. Like, here's what happened to this person. Here's what happened to this person. This thing went on to do this. This book does not do that. So I had some questions. What happened with Perrin and Fael? Are they still together? Is Perrin free of the wolf dream? Is he going to live as a wolf? What is happening? Who knows? I want to know more. what happened with Matt and Tuon? Tuon's pregnant. Tuon rules the Shan-Chan. You know that their peace treaty is never going to last because the Shan-Chan are kind of crazy. Like, did they go back to collaring people? Did peace last for hundreds of years? I want to know. What happened to Elaine, Avienda, and Min post them seeing Randolph in Morden's body? Like, does everybody else know? Do Matt and Perrin know? Are they going to tell them? Is Rand abandoning his family, his 3 wives, and his children that Elaine is pregnant with? Come on, Rand. Like, you can't just run away from your kids, bro. I'm also curious, like, what happened to the rest of the Asha'man and Logain? Did they reform the Black Tower? Are they going to continue to have male channelers and sort of parallel the White Tower? Like, did the Aes Sedai go back to the White Tower and reform it? Was there an everlasting alliance between the two? Now that the Dark One is sealed, you know, where are the next Dark Friends going to come from that are crazy enough to try to free him again? What happened to the Aiel? What happened with Loyal and the other, you know, big cuddly bear friends? What happened to Ogier? Where'd everybody go? It all kind of wraps up very quickly, I feel like, toward the end, which I didn't necessarily have a problem with, but I have so many questions. So many questions. But that sort of brings my experience, my journey of the Wheel of Time to a close. I did love this book a lot. I have tons and tons of questions about what happened to all of this. I'm sure someone on the internet can tell me something, even though the answers don't exist. I'm sure people have theories, and I'd love to hear them. So let me know in the comments down below. Did you make it this far? What did you think of the Wheel of Time? Is it your favorite series of all time? Did you hate it? If you made it all the way to A Memory of Light and you hated the series, that is some very strong stubbornness you have there, viewer. Yeah, let me know. Again, it's not my favorite series of all time. I'm happy to have read it. I'm very impressed by most of it. I think it has a lot of great things going for it while also having a lot of terrible things going for it. It was just very up and down for me. But overall, I mean, it has room on the shelves for a reason. All these hardcovers will remain there in perpetuity. Yeah, so there you have it. That is my conclusion to the Wheel of Time. Thank you all for watching. I'm terribly sorry that this came out a little bit later than expected, but it is here now. My Wheel of Time journey has ended, at least for the books, because I think I'm going to end up reviewing the show as bad as it was. And there is another season coming out, so we'll see what Amazon does with that. But until next time, everybody, thank you for tuning in. See you in the next one.